Hey, it's your girl Ashanti Rashad. Welcome back to my channel. If you love rants, reactions, girl talks, and reviews, make sure that you hit the subscribe button because we have a lot to discuss today. In today's video, we're going to be discussing about Netflix's The Polygamist. Now, before I get into this review, I want to say this is my commentary and my reaction to the series. This is not about attacking anyone's personal beliefs or lifestyles. I'm just talking about the characters, the choices they made, and the lessons that stood out to me while watching. Because let me tell you, this show had me talking to my television. There were moments where I was shocked, frustrated, and honestly just sitting here thinking, how did we get to this point? How did we get here? So let's break down the characters because the characters are what really drive the story. Okay, let's do a character breakdown. First, we're going to start off with Jonas. Jonas Gomorrah. Jonas is the center of the entire story. On the outside, he appears to be a successful man who has everything together. He has a career, a family, and an image that people respect. But as the series continues, we see the choices that he makes behind closed doors. And honestly, Jonas was a character that had me asking a lot of questions because the biggest issue wasn't just the relationship he had. The biggest issue was the secrets, the lack of honesty, and how his decisions affect the people around him. Because when you make decisions that involve other people's hearts, emotions, and lives, you have to think about those consequences. And watching Jonas, I kept thinking, are you really thinking about how this affects everybody else? Now, let's talk about Joyce Gomorrah. Joyce is Jonas's first wife, and the character represents someone who deals with heartbreak, betrayal, realizes that the life she thought she had was not what it seemed. She had the marriage, she had the family, she had the image of stability, but imagine building a life with someone and then discovering there are things happening that you didn't know about. That type of betrayal can completely change how you see a person. And I think a lot of viewers could understand Joyce's emotions because sometimes the hardest part isn't just what happens, it's realizing that the person you trusted made choices that affected your entire life. And Joyce even compromised herself by even allowing Jonas to have a second wife, and that's what we talk about Matima, or the third wife. Matima, now we have to talk about Matima because her character adds another major layer to this story. When you're watching, you're thinking Matima is the second wife. So Matima is just another person involved in Jonas's complicated life. Her storyline creates more tension and focuses on everyone to deal with this consequence, the choice that has been made, because Jonas ended up sleeping with somebody that he worked with, got her pregnant, as well as to have twins along the line. So she's much younger than Joyce. And one thing I think the series does well is showing that people are complicated. Everyone has their own emotions, their own experiences, and their own reasons for their choices that they make. Because when I think about Matima's mother telling her that she wanted better for herself, she didn't want her to sleep with a married man, that doesn't mean that every decision is right. But it does remind us that real life situations are not always simple. Matima's storyline makes viewers think about responsibility, boundaries, and the impact of our choices have on other people. Because when the relationship becomes complicated, it's not just the people involved in the relationship who are affected, it's the families that get affected, the friendships that get offended, and the trust that gets involved. And that's what we get into talking about Essie. Now, Essie is married to Jonas's brother, as you think, but Essie brings another perspective that is complicated in this situation. Her storyline makes you think about love, loyalty, and what people are willing to accept in their relationships. Essie is actually the second wife of Jonas. You would think that Essie is the sister-in-law, but come to find out as you watch throughout the series, Essie is actually the second wife, and she actually meets Joyce in their younger years. And Jonas actually gets Essie and Joyce pregnant at the same time. At the time when Essie was pregnant, she was pregnant with Sarah. At the time when Joyce was pregnant, she was pregnant with their daughter. Now, follow me here. Sometimes people think they know exactly what they would do in a situation until they actually find themselves facing that situation. And Essie's character really showed me that a woman is an enabler. She enabled herself to accept Jonas's behavior. And Sarah felt like she was an outcast because she had to live with this lie for 20 years that her actual cousins are her siblings. And Jonas would go down to their rough neighborhood and visit Sarah and Essie and Freedom. And, Freedom felt like he needed to speak out when it was just him and Essie, to basically say that you don't love yourself. You're accepting crumbs from a man that doesn't even let you shine in the spotlight. And I personally felt like because Jonas elevated his life, he left Essie in a place that was his past. When Essie and Jonas were friends, they ended up becoming more than friends with benefits, so to say. And eventually, even his brother put on to this facade to even cover up that he was married to Essie when in actuality he wasn't. And that's when we're going to talk about the brother. Now, we also have to talk about Jonas's brother because his role adds another layer to the story that really irked my nerves. His brother gave us a different perspective because he isn't just watching Jonas's decisions from the outside, he is family. He understands Jonas, but he also has witnessed the consequences of his decision that Jonas has made. Like, he covered Jonas for everything. He even went to the lengths of making Joyce believe that him and Essie was married when in actuality, they weren't married. And I always felt like that is a relatable story because you can relate to it whether it's not in family or friends. There's always that one friend or that one family member that's going to cover up for you, be by your side no matter what. But I just hate that he really took the time to lie to this lady. And eventually Joyce found out the truth that Essie is actually the second wife and Matima technically is the third wife. So I think that creates a very realistic family dynamic because what do you do when someone you love is making choices that hurt other people? Do you defend them because they're family or do you hold them accountable because you know their actions is wrong? And I'm glad that Jonas's brother eventually did stand up to Jonas. And I think there's something a lot of people can relate. Family can love you, support you, and still have to question your decisions because sometimes accountability has to come from the people that is closest to us. Love doesn't always mean agreeing with everything somebody does. Sometimes love means telling the truth. Now, let's talk about the children. Now, this is where I think the conversation gets deeper because the children are not just side characters. They are ones who have to live with the consequences of the choices the adults have made. And honestly, that was one of the hardest parts of watching this series because adults sometimes say, this is my life, this is my choice. But they forget that their children are watching. Their children are learning what love looks like. Their children are learning what relationships look like. Their children are learning how people handle conflict, betrayal, and forgiveness. And that is a lot for a child to carry. And the children in this series were forced to deal with their family issues that they didn't create. They had to process decisions that they didn't make. And they had to figure out how to move forward with the adults around them, changing everything in their lives. Now, we have to get into the daughter's best friend storyline. Now, we have to talk about this one because this is not only the most shocking, but disturbing parts of this whole series. Jonas' relationship with his daughter's best friend. We get to see that Jonas's daughter's best friend, she's not living the best life, but she glamorized the finer things. And she also asked her boyfriend, like, do you ever see us doing like 11-course meals, having a house, a backyard, and things of that nature? But the boyfriend was like, yeah, but we have to work hard and we have to build up to those things. It just doesn't get handed to us. So Jonas's daughter's best friend, she gets infatuated with her best friend's dad. Mind you, I want to say that the best friend, she got to be at least 18 or 20 years old. That changed the entire conversation. And as a viewer, this was one of the most moments when you sit there and say, wait, what? Especially when Jonas's son catches the daughter's best friend and his dad in the act at the gentleman's club. Like, you really see that the person that you look up to, like the son looks up to the dad and he wants to be like him. But then as he sees that his dad is doing these women's dirty, especially a girl that he liked, mind you, that he went to his dad and said that I like her, I want to marry her. But then come to find out your dad is messing with the daughter's best friend was the craziest thing in the whole storyline. Because I felt like there are young girls out there that feel like because they don't want to date men their age, they want to date higher. They want to date an older gentleman, and there are situations where the older gentleman, because they feel like they have money, they have control, and they have this daddy-daughter type of relationship that is very disturbing. And then it gets to the point where she gets pregnant and she's scared. She doesn't know what to do. They're in the car and he said that I'll fix this. This was Jonas's favorite thing. I'll handle it. I'll fix it. That was his go-to thing. But sadly, the girl was in the hotel crying and she had a miscarriage. She had to go to the hospital and Jonas was nowhere in sight. And I just felt bad for the girl because, every action, there's a reaction, and every choice there's a consequence. Because for one, you didn't have no business messing with that man. And even if she wanted to date an older man, it shouldn't have been her best friend's daddy. Like, that's rule number one. And you have to, as a viewer, this is one of those moments where you just sit there and say, wait, what? Because when you're a parent, your responsibility is not only to yourself, you also have a responsibility to protect your children and the people that you trust. And that's what made this storyline so difficult. This wasn't just about a husband and a wife. This wasn't just about polygamy. This was about boundaries, trust, and the emotional damage that happens when those boundaries are crossed. And imagine having someone you considered a friend become connected to your family and they betrayed you this way and create division. That can affect how someone views their friendship, relationships, trust, and moving forward. And I think the storyline showed one of the biggest lessons of the entire series. Our choices don't only affect us, they affect everyone around us. Damn it! Well, okay, let me start that over. Okay, I'll just say this. This involves someone who was close to his own child, and that changed the entire conversation. And as viewer, this involves someone who was close to his own child, and that changed the entire conversation. And as a viewer, this was one of the most This involves someone who was close to his own child, and that changed the entire conversation. And as a viewer, this was one of those moments where you just sit there and say, wait, what? Because when you are a parent, your responsibility is not only to yourself, you also have a responsibility to protect your children and the people they trust. And that's what made this storyline so difficult to watch. This wasn't just about the husband and wives. This wasn't just about polygamy. This was about boundaries, trust, and the emotional damage that happens when those boundaries are crossed. Imagine having someone you considered a friend become connected to your family in a way that creates pain and betrayal. That can affect how someone views friendships, relationships, and trust moving forward. And I think the storyline showed us one of the biggest lessons of the entire series. Our choices don't only affect us, they affect everyone connected to us. Now, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert towards the ending of this series. Now, if you haven't finished watching The Polygamist, this is your spoiler warning, because I'm about to talk about the ending. The ending showed just how much damage had been done throughout the entire story. After all the betrayal, the secrets, and the heartbreak, Joyce reached her breaking point and made a decision to get revenge. So let's talk about that. Joyce met a woman in prison in the earlier episodes. That woman expressed to her that her ex-boyfriend gave her HIV. Joyce then hired that woman to get Jonas affected with HIV. And the ending definitely created a certain conversation because, one hand, you could understand Joyce's pain, the heartbreak, and the feeling of being betrayed. But at the same time, the revenge creates another cycle of hurt. And that's what stood out to me about this series. It wasn't just about one man having multiple relationships. It was about trust. It was about honesty. It was about boundaries. It was about accountability. And Jonas's choices didn't just affect him. They affected the women involved. They affected his children involved. They affected his family. And by the end, everyone was dealing with those consequences. And Essie felt the need that she had to take the body from the mortuary and have her own funeral. But Joyce wasn't having that. Joyce figured out that Essie was the one that took the body. So Essie took upon herself to go to the mortuary to get Jonas from the mortuary and have her own funeral and bury him her own way. And Joyce was not having that. Essie was so in love with Jonas that she decided to go down to the funeral home, get Jonas's body, have her own funeral with her child and some people that she invited to pay her respects for Jonas, because Joyce never let Essie see him in his final days. Joyce decided to pull up on Essie and tell her that I'm going to bury my husband the way I want. So she got the police to dig him up from the ground and drag him to where she wanted him to be buried. Essie then went to Joyce's funeral and paid her respects to Jonas. Matima made an appearance to pay her respects about Jonas. But then the daughter of Jonas and Joyce, she then accepted her siblings. She accepted Sarah as her sister because, mind you, Sarah was always told as her cousin, but she eventually accepted her as her sister because before she knew that Jonas had another secret baby, like Sarah always longed for that daddy-daughter relationship, and she never got a chance to really build that relationship that Jonas has had with his other children. It had me frustrated. It made me question certain choices. It made me think about relationships, families, and the importance of communication. One scripture that comes to mind while I was watching this series was Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And I think that applies to relationships and the choices that we make, because our decisions don't only affect us, they affect the people around us and connected to us. Healthy relationships require honesty, communication, respect, and accountability. And that is the biggest lesson that I took from the series. Now, I want to hear from you. Did you watch The Polygamist on Netflix? What did you think about Jonas's character? Do you think Joyce's revenge was justified, or do you think she went too far? And if you would like me to do a separate commentary about the children in this series, let me know down in the comment section, because honestly, there is so much more to unpack about their perspectives, there's emotions, and how they were impacted by everything happening around them. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this with someone who loves deep conversations about TV shows and movies. Again, it's your girl Ashanti Rashad, and if you have a series that you would like me to do a review about, make sure you put it in the comment below. Again, this is your girl Ashanti Rashad, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.